Weissman in a nutshell. Today we're fortunate to have the really nice opportunity to spend a few minutes talking with A.J. Croce, the son of one of the members of the rock pantheon, Jim Croce. A.J. has combined his father's folksy, talking like a friend style of presentation with his own progressive vibe to craft for himself a unique rock position that has gained him so much attention. But as long as it's so handy to do so, why don't we get it straight from the horse's mouth today?
Nay.
How are you, Mr. Croce?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you.
And you've been traveling around quite a bit these last few weeks?
Oh, yeah. I've been on the road all year with the new record.
The new record, I listened to it and it's really, really nice. You were born in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, but you probably don't remember much about it?
Well, I've gone back there for years because I still have a lot of family in Philadelphia. So,
okay.
You know, Bryn Mawr used to be the country. Now it's just a suburb, right?
Sure. But you moved to San Diego when you were 2, so that was just after your father's tragic airplane accident?
Right before, yeah, we moved there before he died.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and you know, before he died, he had, you know, intended to take a little break because he'd been going for a couple years, pretty heavy, and released 3 albums in 2 years, and had bought for $1,500, which was a lot for us back then. He had bought a piece of property in Capos in Costa Rica. So we lived down there after he died. My mom and I moved down to Capos and lived in the jungle in an A-frame in the rainforest down in Costa Rica. It was about 6.5 hour drive from San Jose. At the time there was a kerosene generator, and if you can imagine, it was 35 acres for $1,500 on the beach. And that included an A-frame house with a kerosene generator.
Amazing.
In the early 80s, the government changed, and they reclaimed the property and built a hotel. And on the site where our house was, there's a bar that's called Croce's now.
Oh, wow.
How fascinating. Now, when you were 4 years old, I understand that you became completely blind. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I lost my sight at 4. I sort of gradually gained it back. I was completely blind, and then gained the sight back in my left eye. And with you know, corrective and tinted lenses, I can see well enough to drive, though I'm not a great driver, so beware.
Has your vision... So I understand that you regained vision in one eye by the age of 10.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Did it get any better since the age of 10?
No, it stayed about the same. But you know, I've got 20/40 with lenses and with the tinted lenses, and you know, it was a crazy sort of illness. So you know, I just feel lucky to see anything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's really good that you got some vision back. Must have been devastating with all the things that kids have to deal with growing up. That seems like a major addition to the pile.
Hey, it's, you know, it's part of life. Everyone experiences different things, and when you're a kid, you're you know, you're pretty resilient. And it's only, I think, when you get a little bit older and you look back on it, that it becomes harder. I think most kids can roll with difficult circumstances a lot better than adults.
Okay. At what age did you take up a musical instrument?
Well, I think the piano was just there was an upright piano at the house, and my grandmother had one, and I always just played it, you know, from the time I could stand up. Even before I could walk, I was playing the piano. And I'm a lefty, and they gave me a guitar. It was a left-handed guitar. When I was real young, I must have been like 3 or 4, but I didn't really, you know, I didn't really play it that much because it was a bit large for my hands, you know, being just a small kid. and I never picked up the guitar again until I was about 30. And
Really?
yeah, and then I thought it would be fun to learn the instrument. I was given my dad's 1933 LO, which he had given to my mom, who was the guitar that he wrote on. He wrote most of the first two albums, Time in a Bottle and Operator and Leroy Brown, and everything was written on that guitar.
Wow.
And it was, you know, one of the things I inherited from him. You know, the worldly possessions I inherited from my father were a 1933 Gibson LO and a rhyming dictionary.
Well, it could have been worse than that. That sounds like a pretty good inheritance to me. But when you played the piano, it like wasn't because your mother said you play the piano, or it wasn't anything like. You just kind of picked up on it because the piano was there and you were there and had that interest.
Yeah, and I got turned on to, you know, I lost my sight at a young age, and there were a lot of musicians around the house, and my mom was still playing music in the early 70s and mid 70s. Up until the late 70s and early 80s she sang. And so there were always musicians around, and I got turned on, I must have been just a little kid, to Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder and to other guys that couldn't see. And that was a huge influence because it got to me. I felt it, you know. Ray Charles was like the first real serious influence. And of course I played along to the radio. I played along to, you know, to the Beatles and the Stones and the Kinks and and everything that was happening on 70s radio, like ELO and Elton John and stuff. But, you know, and certainly played along with David Bowie stuff. I remember that too as a kid. But it was just one of those things where, you know, I loved soul music. And so, like, that was the early influence for me, soul music. Ray Charles, Otis Redding, Sam Cooke, and that stuff really stuck with me. So regardless of what genre it was, whether it was country music, folk music, whether it was country blues, or whether it was pop music, I've always been influenced by soulful music, you know? And there's soulful music in every genre, you know?
Of course, yeah, sure. How interesting. Now, did you regain your vision gradually between the ages of 4 and 10? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very gradual thing. It was unperceivable, you know, initially I got some sight back. I had learned to read before the age of 4, so I at least had that going for me. I was put into regular schools, although I had to have one of those glasses with the telescoping lens and whatnot to be able to see anything and sit in the front row. But I was you know, just, it was a gradual thing. Eventually, it sort of got to the place where, you know, where I could see. Even, you know, even before I was 10, I mean, I remember seeing things in the world. I remember seeing television shows and cartoons, and I remember things. But I had to sit at a particular angle to be able to see it because of the way that my vision was. It was optic nerve damage. It wasn't like being not farsighted or nearsighted. And so gradually, I got to see the world.
How nice. That must have, at least there was some continuity then of some vision that you didn't really ever lose a hold of what the world looks like out there completely.
No, I think, you know, I think you perceive a lot about the world without seeing it, more than you'd believe. And, you know, I don't know that any senses were working overtime to compensate for the loss of one, in all honesty. I can't say, because I was the person living it and experiencing it, and I was a child, so I didn't have experiences with the world for any duration to tell you. But I could say that you know, there's a lot that we get from our other senses.
Sure, Sure. Okay, now in a nutshell, there's a portion of the show where I encourage the guest on to shameless self-promotion. And I jokingly often ask if they are out for hire for things like weddings, bar mitzvahs, circumcisions, and but as I found out, isn't it true that your first gig was a bar mitzvah?
A bat mitzvah.
Bat mitzvah.
Bat mitzvah, yeah. First gig. Yeah, I've played all of those. I don't know that I've played a bridge. All of them. And I'm available for any, you know. It's not cheap anymore, but my first gig was, you know, I got paid $20 to play at a bat mitzvah, and it was really encouraging because, you know, I didn't play a long set, but it was one of those things where it made a huge impact that the people listening liked it, and I felt like, okay, I'm 12 playing this event. If I keep on practicing and I keep on working hard at it, then I'll eventually, you know, I'll be good at this.
How cool, how cool. Now, I understand that besides having an incredibly talented father, you have an incredibly talented mother.
I do. My mother's done all kinds of things. You know, she started off singing with my dad. They recorded the first album before he had his own record deal. They recorded Jim and Croce on Capitol Records in 1967. Then, and she was an artist. She was a visual artist, a painter, and a potter. She went to Rhode Island School of Design and was accepted at Yale just before we started to just before I came along, and she went out on tour instead of finishing college. She's done all sorts of things. She was an ambassador. She was a vice consulate for Costa Rica because we lived there. She's run a restaurant for 30 years. Written books.
I understand that I read somewhere that she received a scholarship to study in Mexico when she was in her senior year of college.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and she also, you know, again to Yale and to RISD.
And I also understand that when you folks returned from Cuepas, Costa Rica, that she wrote a Head Start program for Costa Rica?
I couldn't tell you about that. Yeah, I mean, I know that she's always a really inspired and hardworking person.
I read a whole litany of amazing things that this woman did, and it was like, how many lifetimes can you squeeze into one lifetime? You know, she opened a children's school in Point Loma. She wrote a children's book, Mirandome. She wrote and sang her own songs, completing 2 solo albums until she developed a medical condition that prevented her from singing anymore.
Right. Yeah, I don't think her albums never got released, and that first book never got released, but her subsequent books have all been released. So yeah, I mean, she's been busy.
She established a publishing company called Time in a Bottle.
Mm-hmm.
She sat on the board of the Women's Bank.
Yeah.
She took you to Israel for your bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
And in 1983...
That was my grandmother, actually, that took me to Israel.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But she met me there. Yeah, my mom met me there. I was staying with some friends that I went to school with, because I went to a Jewish school for 3 years, and had friends that had moved back to Israel, and so I stayed with them for a month, and
oh, nice.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
And she signed up for the Stockholm Marathon and came in 3rd place.
Yeah, I think second or third of all women, if you could believe it. She did great, and that was her first marathon.